News18 Primetime Studios, ladies and gentlemen. First up, let's get you some of the stories. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has embarked upon his first foreign trip since being elected Prime Minister for a third time, and he is off for the G7 summit in Italy. He will reach around 2:30 a.m. on Friday morning, and he will be representing Bharat participating for the 11th time, and the PM himself for the 5th time. He will be meeting the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, and there are other bilateral scheduled, although no conversations with Justin Trudeau. Climate change, environment, and of course the effort to help developing nations tops the agenda at this G7 summit. Bharat's retail closer home. Meanwhile, the retail inflation is eased to a 12-month low of 4.75% in May on an annual basis, down to 4.83% in April, according to the government data released on Wednesday. And this figure is lower than what most economists had actually predicted. With this, the retail inflation has remained within the RBI's target range of 2 to 6% since September 2023. The PLI scheme is also expected to attract investments of 3 to 4 lakh crore in the next 4 years and generate about 2 lakh jobs, as large projects in sectors including semiconductor, solar module and pharmaceutical intermediaries are expected to take off. And this is what a top executive of ICRA has said. ICRA Executive Vice President and Chief Ratings Officer K. Ravichandran has said that going ahead, private sector capex is expected to pick up in oil and gas, metals and mining, hospitals, healthcare and the cement sectors. Meanwhile, signaling the era of continuity, the government has reappointed Ajit Doval as the National Security Advisor, along with continuing the jobs and responsibilities of those within the PMO. Additionally, Dr. P.K. Mishra was also reappointed as the Principal Secretary to the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and their appointments, which came into effect from June 10th, will be coterminous with the term of the Prime Minister until further orders. So till the time Prime Minister remains, the PMO officials remain, and of course Ajit Doval continues. And talking about security, ladies and gentlemen, and the challenges thereof, let's try and understand what's going to happen. Now, on Wednesday evening, what we brought to you here on the right stand was the link between what's happening in Reasi, Kathua, Doda, the resurgence or trying to effort to reignite terrorist activities on Indian soil by Pakistan, this proxy war. And we drew that connection with the LAC, saying there is a need to try and ease the pressure that Bharat's forces have built on the PLA, and so that they can continue with their aggression there and force some redeployment across Jammu and Kashmir. But there is a bigger play here. There is a Beijing blueprint. The money for the Pakistanis, where they don't have money, they're a bankrupt nation right now. They're going around with a begging bowl. So where is this money coming from for them to be able to foment this terror on Indian soil? We get you those details courtesy our Group Editor Security Manoj Kumar Gupta, who's telling us that there is a significant meeting that happened. A security setup to compel India to move its troops from LAC to Jammu. We got you that details. Now let's get you this Beijing blueprint. And this is details accessed exclusively by CNN News 18, and we're breaking it here on the right stand. First up, CNN News 18 has exclusively accessed the Beijing blueprint, and according to intel sources to CNN News 18, the Kashmir plot was reignited, and there was perhaps an indication to try and further go ahead and stir the pot, and this was during Shehbaz Sharif's visit to China. In the meeting, China asked Pakistan to dare India, continue to prod. China asked Pakistan to use the China-Pak economic corridor to challenge India. And more exclusive details that are coming in. Now, as per intel sources, China is actually bankrolling Pakistan's proxy war. The economy jihad plot, that's what's been accessed by CNN News 18. Pak is redirecting CPEC security funds. Pakistan is now using Chinese yuan to carry out jihad against Bharat, this entire proxy war. And how? Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's statement on Tuesday. Recent 5-day visit to China remained successful. High-powered Chinese delegation to Pakistan soon. Visit was a great opportunity to strengthen ties. Security issues highlighted in the meeting. Swift and successful execution of second phase of the China-Pak-China economic corridor. These were the top lines that were stated. But here's the reading between the lines. there has been funds, and what Pakistan has gone ahead and said that no progress in the CPEC corridors and certain regions in Pakistan are because of India's meddling. That's what they've gone and said. And there has been a decadal dependence on funds. Either it's the US dollars and now it's the Chinese yuan. And what they have gone and sold to Beijing is that it is India that is disrupting CPEC work. Terror outfits bankrolled by Bharat are disrupting CPEC work, and that's why we can't provide you security. You give us money and we will provide you security. The cover fire given to Jaish-e-Mohammed is because the Jaish-e-Mohammed jihadis are the ones who are the mercenaries guarding that entire CPEC corridor construction, not the Pakistani army. So that's another open secret. And that's the reason why the Jaish-e-Mohammed and also Masood Azhar got so much of cover fire at the UN Security Council 1267 from China's veto. Because they were coming in handy, giving this foot soldiers and people to guard that and doing that duty. Now Pakistan says India is disrupting it. Earlier, Pakistan was telling the US, listen, you give us the dollars and we will help you. And they were redirecting the dollars towards Bharat's proxy war, and US turning a blind eye to that. Now, Beijing is the one bankrolling the yuan on the guise of security funds, and it's being redirected once again towards Bharat. Tuin Sinha, national spokesperson of the BJP with us, Sushant Sareen, senior fellow ORF with us, Aina Tangen, political affairs commentator also with us. Namaste to everybody. Thank you very, very much. We've got more details, but first up, Sushant Sareen, this is a big challenge. Now, if China is now going to bankroll the CPEC, already billions of dollars have been pumped in there. Not much has happened. That $48 billion road, only 2 kilometers of it has been built. About $5 billion spent already. More yuan coming in via security funds, and that money being redirected here. How do we tackle this?
So Anand, this nexus between these two countries is not a new thing for us. It's been there since the early 60s. And in the recent years, it's actually this nexus has, further strengthened. The only thing which ties both these countries together is their mutual hostility and enmity towards India. The Chinese are no better than the Pakistanis when it comes to, their hatred for India, and it's very visible in virtually every sphere of activity. That is one. So there is nothing new in this. Number two, what is new is that I think the Chinese also understand that Pakistan, as far as economy is concerned, is a duff deal. The CPEC has failed. It's collapsed completely. It's not working. The Chinese projects are making massive losses. The Pakistanis can't pay back money. The Pakistanis are going, every 3 months with a begging bowl in their hands. I think even the Chinese are sick of putting money in that begging bowl. But the strategic level relationship remains very much intact because of the first factor I told you, which is their mutual enmity towards India. That's the only glue which ties them. Otherwise, culturally, there's nothing in common. They don't speak the same language. There's absolutely nothing in common. And the Chinese, apart from whatever strategic value Pakistan is a dog snapping at India's heel. That's the only purpose it serves for the Chinese. And, to some extent, it's probably the only friend they have, because they don't have too many friends, especially because of their behavior. So this is where this problem is. And frankly, I'm not surprised the fact that Shahbaz Sharif made the visit at the time when the new Indian government was, being sworn in, or at least the election results had come out. And there was going to be a closer coordination as far as security matters related to India is concerned. But I think a lot of Shahbaz Sharif's message he's trying to put a positive spin within his own country that I'm coming back with a lot of goodies from China. The Chinese really haven't given him much money, certainly not of the kind he was expecting. Maybe they do it later, we don't know. But there's nothing in the joint statement which suggests that there's any big manna from heaven or from the Middle Kingdom coming to the Pakistanis. Nothing of the sort, except for one or two strategic projects which are of more of interest to the Chinese than they are to Pakistan. But other than that, at best, maybe the Chinese are going to roll over their loans. But whatever new monies will come in the strategic domain. For example, there's some talk of, some more fighter jets being given to Pakistan, some other defense equipment being given. And I'm not entirely surprised that there is a wink and a nudge that you ramp up terrorism in Jammu so that some of the troops that had been relocated to the northern frontiers with China.
Exactly.
It creates a bit of a problem for the Indians. It's not going to take much, to refill those gaps that have been created. But I think that is the direction in which we are headed. But I think at the same time, Anand, we have to recognize that it's a dangerous situation which is developing along both our western and our northern borders. And I think we cannot afford to be sanguine that just because Pakistan is bankrupt, they are not going to, enter into some kind of a fray with India. Right. I think, in fact, precisely because they are bankrupt, to show that they are still alive and kicking, they'll try and pull something funny. They did it in Kargil. In Kargil, they were virtually bankrupt.
Right.
They had about $1 billion in their foreign exchange reserves, and yet they indulge in this kind of military adventurism. So don't put it past them, and I think we need to be on eternal vigil against both these enemy countries.
Well, there is a huge amount of unaccounted for cash that is doing the rounds in Pakistan. Currently, Pakistan is being propped up by this entire black economy that's fueled by narcotics, that's fueled by hard cash, and that's not accounted for money. But Aina Tangin, will the CCP be okay for Pakistan to do what it did with America? That is, redirect funds towards a proxy war that they want to wage with India?
Well, Anand, you're asking a question that has a fact that is not in evidence. Obviously, China and Pakistan have had difficulties, especially security, also meeting deadlines when it comes to projects. The CPEC is definitely a very, very complex project. There are things that Pakistan still has to do. But China's not a fool, neither is the United States. I understand that my colleague doesn't seem to like anybody, everyone's an enemy. But the fact is that China does not regard India as an enemy. It is not the first topic on conversation. It is really about the U.S. And the attempts of the U.S. to use India as an enemy. And this is what China would like to avoid. The proxy wars that we see in both Israel and also Ukraine are not something that I think anybody wants coming to Asia. So at this point, I think with Jaishankar saying that he would like to engage with the Chinese on border issues, I think this is an opening rather than trying to just air out all the old grievances which aren't going anywhere.
Well, 62, China invaded India. 9 years later, it bankrolled the 1971 war chest for the Pakistanis at that time. It also provided its own planes, although that Air Force and that entire fleet was rendered inadequate or not able to perform on its whatever its role it was supposed to do. So these are all chronicled information that China has been meddling,
that's chronicled
in
information
India,
you like
with India,
to assert,
with
but
India
the fact
and
is
backed
the
Pakistan.
Chinese see it differently. So if you want to litigate the past, and you want to use an India-centric narrative
let's take the recent part. 1267 UN Security Council. Why would China block the Masood Azhar case and also Jaish-e-Mohammed?
Yeah.
Unless it was at the behest of Pakistan.
They saw it as political. And I know that this is not something that India has ever done. Just recently, they were saying that India puts its own interests first. I don't know why it objects to other countries doing what they think is in the best interest of their countries. At this point, you can quote all the past, hasn't been good, or you can try to look to a better future. So, if you think that the success of these two countries is based on deepening rifts, that's up to you.
My question, that's why I started with this question, Aina Tangin, before I bring in Tuinsana, that will China be okay with the money that it's actually giving Pakistan to secure the CPEC, finding it getting rediverted towards reactivating, terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir?
I mean, you're asking a ridiculous question. Of course they wouldn't be okay with it. That hasn't happened yet, unless you have some proof that no one else has. You like to throw in as fact what is in fact conjecture. There's a difference. If you're a lawyer and you're going into a courtroom, the judge would tell you to lay a foundation before you try to enter something into evidence. So right now, if they were to do that, of course, China would cut off the funds. They're not interested in bankrolling somebody who's corrupt. There is corruption everywhere, including India. But China, it just takes a dim view of it. They take a dim view of it in their own country, as you can well see. They actually prosecute people for stealing money from the state or from the people. Not something that happens much elsewhere.
A few kilometers have been constructed of the 800-kilometer motorway from Gwadar to Ratode. $5 billion out of this $48 billion project has already been spent. The $46 billion project. 800 kilometers of motorway, not even about 10 kilometers has been built, and the cost attached to it is $5 billion already. So, which heads are rolling in Pakistan is a question. Yes, Beijing has pulled up Pakistan on these lapses, but now it seems to be saying, Pakistan seems to have convinced Beijing, oh, we've not done anything, it's all being done by India. To Insina, you see the situation building around us.
I don't think that's something that Beijing believes. They believe that Pakistan made assurances that it could protect Chinese workers. These are mostly engineers who were working on this project. And if they don't come through with that, it doesn't matter. Chinese engineers will be pulled.
So that's the confirmation now that there is money that's been released in terms of security funds, where Pakistan has said, give us money to... So that's the information that we have. Let me just bring in the BJP spokesperson with us, Tuhin Sinha. Yes, Tuhin, thank you for your patience. Now, how would you read this situation and what should be India's response here?
Well, Namaste, Anand. In the last decade or so, there is no doubt that Pakistan has reduced itself to being a colony of China, thanks to China's insidious debt diplomacy and Pakistan's complete lack of self-respect. India, under Prime Minister Modi, has not only been cognizant of the joint threats from both of them, but also acted with a lot of promptness, with a lot of alacrity, and that is one of the reasons why the threats stand subverted, or the threats stand nullified to a very large extent. But yes, given the fact that Shehbaz Sharif had visited China recently, there is a spurt of terrorist activity in the last 4 days. It makes us all the more vigilant. If I may just quickly take you through some of the steps, both militarily and diplomatically, whether it is the formation of Quad, whether it is, the India-Middle East-European corridor, or whether it is the slew of PLI schemes in India, all of these are designed in a way to reduce China's economic heft across the globe. Sadly, we have, a leader like Rahul Gandhi, who on the eve of India-Middle East-European corridor being announced, was in Europe singing praises of one belt, one road. But anyway, when it comes to Pakistan, again from 2016, start of 2016 onwards, which is, the Pathankot incident, or Pathankot terrorist attack, we have been very consistent in reducing Pakistan's heft globally, whether that was getting them grey-listed by FATF twice, or whether it was Pakistan's reducing Pakistan's heft even within the Islamic world with our strategic forays and business interests with Saudi Arabia. So we are completely cognizant of the threat. We are, constantly acting against it, and rest assured, we will be completely equipped to handle it.
Are you convinced, Sushant Sareen?
Convinced of what? I think
that India is going to be equipped to handle this situation right now that's brewing.
We have no choice. We have to do it because it's a matter of national security. So I think we'll pull out all the plugs to make sure that we have whatever we require along these borders. But I think it's very important to recognize that Mr. Tangent is entitled to his views, and he can feel offended that if China is called an enemy country. But I am very curious to know what is a good friendly act that the Chinese have done, at least in the last 10 years or the last 20 years. In fact, just recently, just a couple of weeks back, Anand, we've got to know that the Chinese have actually been doubling down, in fact, actually going haywire in propagating and promoting Khalistani propaganda. and inciting violence in India. These are Chinese who are behind this entire project. That's not the act of a friendly country. You mentioned about the Jaish-e-Mohammed. I wonder if Mr. Tangent and his country, or whichever country he belongs to nowadays, will ever give a visa to somebody like a Jaish-e-Mohammed guy. Are these the kind of people they will invite inside China? And yet, when it comes to banning these people and internationally prescribing terrorism, the Chinese actually play fiddle until they're literally with their backs to the wall, and then they feel that there's a lot of shame going to be attached, and that is when they back off. But even otherwise, if you look at everything else that the Chinese have done, whether it is disturbing the borders along eastern Ladakh, the way they have been behaving on other platforms against India, those are not actions of a friendly country. And as far as the use of proxies are concerned, for the Chinese to claim that they are not the ones who use proxies, I mean, okay, fine, you can say whatever you want to say, but it's not easy for the rest of the world to accept that, because it clearly does not, it doesn't stack up to what is happening on the ground. So I really don't agree with what Mr. Tangent is saying, but I would caution Tuhin and his party that it's good to be confident, it's good to be well prepared, but it's very important to make sure that you've covered all the various angles which you might have to confront when you are dealing with two very perfidious neighbors. So I would strongly recommend that.
Tuhin Sinha?
Well, Mr. Sareen's caution is well appreciated. But like I said, whether it is on the military front, whether it is standing up to the dragon in Doklam, Galwan, or Tawang, or whether it is the PLI schemes which have begun to yield results. And by the way, the semiconductor manufacturing push is the way the world is looking at China plus one policy. All of these are going to reduce China's economic heft globally, and the economic heft and political clout are related together. So I think there is a larger plan definitely in place, and it's a matter of time before the results of that plan are more visible to the world.
See, but you would also appreciate that China is so far ahead of us economically that we'll have to grow at least 12% per annum over the next 10 years to get close to where China is. So as an economic heft, China does have, so let's always not underestimate what the adversary has or what the entity who we want to measure up against already enjoys. The other aspect, sir, is
Anand, we don't have a middle kingdom complex. We don't want to rule the world. We don't want to make oceans into our personal lakes. We don't want to do all of that. We want security and prosperity for our people. We want a world in which everybody can live in peace like good neighbors. We don't have those complexes which the Chinese have, whether you call them inferiority complex or whatever other complex. We don't have that. That's not our worldview. That's not how we look at people. We look at other people. I'm
purely on the economics aspect of it. The economic aspect of it.
We have no intention of invading China. We have no intention of occupying any Chinese territory. We are in a defensive posture, and in a defensive posture, you don't need what you need as in an offensive posture. And if the Chinese were to get offensive, then we have adequate preparations to handle that.
Where I am coming from is not just the economic heft that we have to live up to. We have multiple challenges because our biggest borders are undefined and we are exposed to Chinese occupied territory. We share our borders with Tibet and Nepal, so we don't share it with China. But large parts of Tibet are all Chinese occupied territory. They are the PLA is squatting there right now, and they have been trying to salami slice and make ingress. If they don't do something in Ladakh, they will do something in Arunachal, because that's how widespread is, and we've not got that resolution. And that's something which they will brutally use, because they believe in comprehensive national power. We know all of this. Yes, Tuhin Sinha.
Anand, I'm glad you're raising these issues, because that is where the multi-pronged approach of this government becomes very important. Point is that in the last 10 years, we have come a long way, but yes, a lot more needs to be done, which we are equally, abreast of. The point is, in February 2014, we had the UPA defense minister justify the non-construction of infrastructure in areas like Arunachal by saying that if we do that, that would enrage China. And today, look at the quantum of infrastructure creation which has been done in the border areas. In fact, the vibrant village policy makes the border, the villages at the border, the first pillars of development. So all of these are meant to reiterate, to reassert that India's sovereignty is non-negotiable. Then, of course, comes the economic aspect. Then it comes the international diplomacy aspect. So I think it's a deft, multi-pronged approach which we have been working on, and we will only in all
humility, unless we are very honest with where we are and what we do, we will not be able to work towards where we want to be. The fact is that in Ningchi, which is directly in line with Arunachal Pradesh, there is a bullet train that now the Chinese have built a railway track along with the 295 road that goes all the way till there. We are just constructing roads. So we have to work, if we want to secure our borders, at 10 times the pace of the PLA to catch up with them in the next 5 to 7 years or a decade. That's what I am trying to say, that they will continue to disrupt us, and this is something that we should take cognizance of, because we get caught up in the minutiae. Our fight is not with Pakistan, which, like Mr. Sareen said, is nothing but a canine snapping at our heels, but it's with the larger behemoth on this front, which is using that front and that vassal to try and continue to irritate us. And unless we secure this area and we resolve this will continue to spread our forces, to spread our fight and our resources. That's what I'm trying to say, that this is a broad game of chess, and we are fighting with people who are already grandmasters at it. So Pragnananda may be getting the better of Ding Liren of late, but are we, as Bharat, getting the better of the CCP and the PLA? That's the larger question that I'm asking. And the other thing, Mr. Tangian, I'm asking you, that you say that China doesn't look at India as an adversary. But all the aspects or all the moves against India have been hostile. Renaming of Arunachal, trying to continue to push. Again, this push and this entire occupancy of heights and trying to of territory along the LAC, continuing to stall on the border talks. All of these don't show talks about any aspect of friendliness or how you would behave with a nation that you look at as a friend.
Well, the friendliness hasn't been there, that's for certainly. Obviously, India's joining with the Quad in basically a alliance against China. That doesn't speak to friendliness either. Both sides have, in fact, named it. Now, in response to my colleague, if he wants to make me the issue, that's fine. I was asked on this show to, as an independent commentator, to give my impression of what Beijing is thinking. If he doesn't like it, I understand. But I don't think necessarily making me the issue is going to make it go away. You can certainly criticize his own government about their stance on foreign policy. But at the heart of this is you have two civilizations, China and India. They know better. They've lived through centuries and centuries, eons, thousands of years, understanding just how difficult it is to make peace and how easy it is to make war, but how important it is to have better possibilities for your people. So I think that they can come to some sort of resolution. I like what you said, Anand, about exactly where you are, but I don't agree that building up more infrastructure on disputed areas is necessarily going to solve this. I think it takes diplomacy. And hopefully that will be the way that this is resolved in the end.
But that is possible when the situation is like to like, when you have two nations who are not expansionist in design, who do not covet the other territory. But for China, it's the other way, sir. For China, it's always attack and squat. Enter and squat, enter and squat, and keep pushing through, and then play the long game as far as diplomacy is concerned, where eventually that area continues to be also designed from the PLA and the CCP. As long as they follow Mao's blueprint, it is the palm and five fingers, and they will covet territory that does not belong to them. So that is Tibet, and also sovereign states or sovereign territory that belongs to India and some of the other nations in this neighborhood. And that's the sad part. that you can, one nation
They
wants
see
to
it
push
the
through its
exact
expansion.
opposite. They see it as India salami slicing their way. They believe that the '62 war was caused by India. As I say, we can
No, but
we can
Mr.
talk
Tangen,
about
the
this
facts,
forever, but it
the
won't
facts
change
are
the
evident on
future.
ground who's sitting on whose territory. And if you go back to treaties even as recent as 1914,
If
who
they
signed that
wanted
treaty?
to sit on
Who signed
Indian
that treaty? And there
territory,
was no
they
PLA then. There was no
withdrew.
CCP then. So I'm just saying that there is
They
a historic
withdrew.
background, but there is an attitudinal present too. The attitudinal present is not saying that, okay, let's
you
go
admit
back
that
and
they did withdraw
retain
in
territory.
'62.
No.
They had a lot of extra territory. They could have kept on marching in. They didn't. They withdrew.
That's also because
Right.
of the. That's also because of the
Because
Great
of
Famine,
what?
and there are
Because
other
you were winning?
geopolitical
No.
factors that force the pushback. So there are other reasons. So that's another discourse for another time. Because
But I'm
facts,
saying that it
facts
won't
stated,
solve the
facts
present.
stated economically can also present a very economical version of the truth. So let's try and look at all facets. I'll